Thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Under strange and unexplainable circumstances. Most cases remain unsolved. What happened? Where did they go? Locations unknown.
Thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to a very special episode of Locations Unknown. I'm your co-host, and today we have a different co-host with us. It is an encyclopedia editor, researcher, explorer, and she helps us with our social media. Michelle Medic is in the studio. How's it going, Michelle?
Hi, it's going great. Thank you.
So why are you here?
I am here because we are doing Locations Unknown, Gone in Alaska. I've done a lot of traveling, 26 countries, all the states, and I drove to 49 of them, including Alaska. Alaska really stuck with me. I spent a month traveling around up there, and I am obsessed with the last frontier, and I am here to share that with you.
So you drove to Alaska from where? Where do you live?
From Chicago.
How long was that?
That was 10,000 miles round trip.
How long did it take you?
So I kind of beat a path up there pretty quick to get as much time in Alaska as possible. So I did it in 7 days up there so that I'd have 2 weeks up there.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
So you're uniquely qualified to do the Gone in Alaska.
Yes.
You went to Alaska. That is fantastic. We're really excited about this. We're hoping that if this goes well, which I assume it will, we're going to have at least a monthly special where you have how many episodes lined up that are all Alaska-based?
8.
8. So this will be the first of 8 of this mini-series. So we're all very excited. It'll probably be between me and Mike swapping off, co-hosting with you. It's just cool to have another person in the studio. And if you want to call and tell us about how great of a job Michelle did on the episode, you can call 208-391-6913. Just remember that everything you say will be used and held against you in a Patreon episode, which is a lot of fun. So call, tell us how much you love the show. Outside of that, let's get right into it. All right, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown.
June 19th, 2014. On a desolate stretch of island beach in Katmai National Park and Preserve in Alaska, a battered red and white kayak, a map, journals, full bags of rice and lentils, and one French passport was found. It told the name of a missing man and about his 3,000-mile journey. Join us this week for a special edition of Locations Unknown, Gone in Alaska, where we investigate the strange disappearance of François Guenot.
All right, so why this case?
I chose this case as the first in the series because it happened around the time I was in Alaska. And also, I managed to charter a plane for a day hike to the same remote, uninhabited island where François Guenot was last seen alive. I was going there to hunt for Japanese glass fishing floats.
As one does.
as one does in Alaska. But my plane was hit by a willowa, which is this crazy wind that runs into cliffs and mountains, and my plane crashed. Luckily, I did not become an episode of the show.
I know, right? I remember you told me about this, and because for full disclosure, Michelle was one of the first people that applied for the research job. We met, and she's a really interesting background working for Merriam-Webster's, or no, Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm sorry. And you wrote up this story, and I thought you wanted us to do it, and you're like, no, actually, I think this is a whole miniseries, and I have a really personal connection to this, because I'm like, oh, tell me about your plane crash so I can explain it. And she's like, no, I'm going to talk about it. So this is way better. So what was it like being in a plane crash?
You know, it wasn't as dramatic as it sounds. It was a little 6-seater Cessna float plane, so we basically just bounced a lot into the beach.
That's so, like, you came down floating, not under power of the engine, like you were going down, but it's a small plane, so you kind of glided down.
Oh no, we crashed.
Now, did they explain that was happening while you're in the plane?
You know, I don't actually recall the pilot saying anything. But
Did you have like headphones on so you could communicate?
We did. Yes.
So what was it he or she flying?
He.
Like what? So did a thing happen and then all this stuff started? Like explain what was going through your head.
He was yelling, "Look at the water spouts in the water," and he said he'd never seen them in September. That usually they're seasonal in the winter. And
so water spouts, there are more than one?
Yes. Yes. And I had my phone out, and I was just trying to record the plane crash for some reason. So I was just looking out the window and ignoring the whole thing.
So you have a video of this?
It's just kind of a weird, grainy 3-second. Probably I should. That should probably not have been my natural reaction. Let me.
I feel like I would have done that too, because I would have been like, okay, I need to do a message out the. So like you knew you were going down.
Yes. And the other passenger, his seatbelt snapped, and so he was plastered to the roof of the plane.
Are you serious?
He
so
was
like
fine.
you were going down enough that he was just
that he got thrown onto the roof of the plane, and I was still.
I love how you're playing this off like it was a minor. Oh, we just bumped into the beach.
We really did.
But like
as an apology, the pilot flew us into an active volcano on the way home to make up for missing our day hike and my beachcombing trip.
And you like trusted the same plane, same pilot.
Yes.
Who just crashed into a beach with just water spouts now fly into an active volcano.
He dipped us into
so you are a true adventurer, an explorer. That's fantastic. You're going to replace either me or Mike. Everyone should call in and say who. You have to wait till she does the episode with Mike and then see who's going to be kicked out, because I don't have any cool stories like that. That is insane. So I'm glad you did not become the show.
Thank you. Me too.
Because now we'll have many more shows with you in it. So what we'll do is I'm going to talk about Katmai National Park and Preserve, and then you'll talk about François and the story. So am I saying that right? Because you're the one person here between Mike and I who could actually correct it properly. So Katmai National Park and Preserve is more than 4 million acres. It's the site of the largest volcanic eruption in the 20th century. That was in 1912 at Mount Katmai Novarupta eruption, and one of the top 5 largest eruptions in history. Out of the 4 million acres, the park has fewer than 6 miles of maintained trails. So that's about 0.00015% of the park has hikeable trails. So do people bushwhack through the park? So they'll go wherever they want.
Yes.
There's just no trails.
Yes, it's completely open for backcountry travel.
Typical Alaska.
Yes. That's why I love it.
That is, see, I agree with you on that. It's like one of the last untouched wildernesses. So areas of interest: the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, Brook Falls, the Aleutian Range. It forms the backbone of the Alaska Peninsula, rising 7,000 feet in elevation in places. There are glaciers that are miles long and wide, and rocky, foreboding, jagged coastlines. So when you're talking, I'll put images up on the board so people who are actually watching can see some of this stuff. So the nearest town is king salmon. It's about a 30-minute plane ride or a 45-minute boat ride because the park is not accessible by car. So Alaska, you have to fly, you have to crash there or ride a boat there. Approximately 260 miles southwest of Anchorage. It was established in 1918. It sees an average of 33,000 visitors a year, which is shocking to me. That's a lot more than I would have expected for a area you have to fly to or boat to. It is one of the least visited parks in the U.S. because of the difficulties getting there. So it's just some interesting historical facts, and just jump in and correct me on anything I get wrong. This is going to be like the most accurate pronunciation episode we've ever had, and I'm so excited for it.
Oh, no, the pressure.
I know, right? I don't think you have to worry. You just do an okay job, it'll be significantly better. It provides critical habitat for sockeye salmon and brown bears. The Brook Falls during the summer salmon season, where bears congregate to feed, is the largest protected population of brown bears in North America, and that's when the majority of the park's visitors come, sometimes up to 200 visitors per day in peak season, which is a lot considering the super low annual total. So is this where we see all the, I feel like we see pictures and videos of bears catching salmon jumping in the stream. This is the place where that happens.
Standing by the bridges watching that, this is that place.
Oh, no, I want to go there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that makes sense now. Fat Bear Week. We're in we just had Fat Bear Week in October, where you can vote online for which bear you think is the most successful at bulking up for hibernation. I just saw the last two. It was like a gray one and a more gray one and a more brown one, and the gray one had like a beer belly. It looked like it actually had like a gut outside of its normal size. So we'll have some images of that popping up in a little bit too. The area was inhabited for about 9,000 years. Native Alaskans, Alutiiq. I said that wrong, didn't I? Alutiiq. See, you have the pronunciation. I still can't do it. They were there for the natives. There were 4 villages in what is now Katmai before the eruption. The park was formed around land that was decimated by the eruption with the goal of protecting the area, preserving the habitat of the salmon and bears, and studying the effects of volcanism on the land. Researchers visited after the eruption and found thousands of fumaroles, which is a vent out of which steam escapes, like a geyser, but with steam instead of water. Fumaroles are usually found near volcanic sites. We didn't yet understand the effects of volcanic eruptions, and in many ways we still don't, but back then scientists thought these were permanent features. They thought they'd found the next Old Faithful. This inspired them to lobby for protecting the valley, directly contributing to founding of the national park. So, and then you said they just dried up after a few decades, so it was not the next Old Faithful. Yes. The villagers had to leave after the eruption. The ash blocked out the sun there on Kodiak Island for 3 days. It took the salmon years to recover, and the Alaskan natives resettled elsewhere on the Alaskan Peninsula. The Alutiiq people are still involved in substantive activities, archaeology, conservation, and research in the park. Luckily, there was ample warning before the eruption, so no one died, and Alaska is frequently affected by earthquakes, up to 1,000 measurable ones each month. I was expecting that to say year. Holy crap. So that's 11% of the world's total happens in Alaska. That place is just crazy.
Yes.
It's insane. The number and intensity increased in the days before, and that caused the villagers to evacuate before the big explosion. Well, that's nice. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes, the name given to the land around the volcanic eruption, which was used as training ground for NASA astronauts in the 1960s for the Apollo mission, because the landscape is similar to the moon, and communicating with mission control from that far away was a good test of the equipment and procedures. So just some in-depth features. Our friends over at the Köppen Climate Classification System say that it's a subarctic with cool summers and year-round rainfall. All Trails information. There are 7 hikes on All Trails, from easy half-mile walks to the remains of one of the native villages to moderately difficult 11-mile treks. Some of the types of dangers that are present in the area. There are 2,200 brown bears, more than any other national park in the world, plus moose. All types of terrain are present. Almost all the park is open for backcountry travel and all the dangers that accompany it. So you have exposure. Weather's unpredictable. You're in Alaska. No one's coming to get you, at least quickly, when they finally do find out that something's happened. So Lots of storms. If there is a storm and you need to come in by plane, not happening. So you're going to be waiting on a boat. So you want to plan accordingly to bring a lot more food than you need. The park site says this about the weather. Located between the stormy North Pacific Ocean and even stormier Bering Sea, the Katmai region is often a battleground between weather systems. When you visit, be prepared to encounter all types of weather. That's hilarious. The park's in the center of a weather battle between two of the most extreme areas. There is a serious lack of shelter. So Brooks Campground operates in the summer with a restaurant, a lodge, campsites, kayak rentals, and supplies. But when it's closed, none of those things are available elsewhere in the park. There are a few privately run fly-in lodges in or near the park, but these are pretty scattered, so they're probably not much use in an emergency. So difficulty in general, it's a challenging park. Visits here require a lot of coordination, flexibility, preparation. It's not a vacation. I think it's safe to say you're doing work. If you plan to visit, you can email your planned backcountry itinerary to the Katmai Park Rangers or fill it out in person if you're visiting during the peak months, so that if something goes wrong and you don't check back in, they know where to go look for you. So, Michelle, tell us about François.
Okay, so here is more about François Guenot. He was male, 35 years old when he disappeared. He was tall, fit, lanky. There isn't an official height and weight because no official missing persons report was ever filed because his family in France didn't understand American procedures. But he kept a blog during his travels, so there are plenty of images of François. So you can see he was bearded, light brown hair, and the clothing he was last seen in: chest waders, a green rain jacket, gloves, a blue bandana. François was cheerful, resourceful, happy, adaptable, a hard worker, friendly. Here are some quotes from his friends. A bull-headed son of a bitch who would just go for it. That was friend Coulter Barnes.
Sounds about right.
The ultimate improviser, always with a smile on his face. Bjorn Olsen. François' mantra was, "It's better to die in the ocean than to be stuck in an office."
I kind of like that. It's very poetic and may play some clues into what happened.
He had no known medical issues. And back home in Europe, his hobby was cross-country skiing and travel. He worked as a mountaineering guide in Switzerland. He'd hitchhiked across Austria in his 20s. He was really familiar with winter sports and physical activity. But he wasn't prepared for Alaska. He had almost no experience in Alaska. As we'll get into, François had gotten himself into some pretty dangerous situations during his travels in Alaska before ultimately disappearing.
You would have think that mountaineering guide in Switzerland would kind of at least prepare you a little bit, but Alaska's just a whole
other creature.
It's just a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
That's so wild. I've never seen Mike's gone. I've never been. He should have hosted this with you. He's going to do the next one. But I want to go so bad. I want to do Denali.
I love Denali. That's why I drove there. I won a permit in the road lottery to drive through the park in your private vehicle. It's only open to private vehicles 3 days out of the year. And
are you so it's incredibly hard to get that permit?
Yeah, I had applied for years before I won one. And you aren't allowed to take a rental car or a vehicle you don't own into the park, onto the park road for obvious reasons. So I was like, welp, I guess I'm driving my Nissan Maxima to Alaska.
Oh my God. That is so awesome.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to need like pictures from that too. We're going to post all that stuff.
I have plenty, yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so here's a list of people that will be involved in this case and their relationship. There's Katmai National Park Chief Ranger Neil Labrie. There's a few Alaska State biologists. There's François' father, Robert, and his younger brother, Philippe, and many friends and Alaska natives that François met on his journey. And so here's a list of gear François had with him. A 14-foot red and white kayak he reconstructed. He patched the worn-out bottom of this kayak with plastic grocery bags and tree sap. He stuffed it with insulation to ensure it would float above the water because he was afraid of drowning.
Of course, yeah, as one would when they're patching their kayak with grocery bags and plaster. Oh my gosh.
Instead of pedals for steering, he had lines he wrapped around his feet. Before he acquired the kayak, he was traveling around Alaska by bicycle that he added a wheeled garbage can onto. And you can see this in our lead image of François.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that back up
Yeah.
again.
So he made a trailer to tow his stuff behind him on the bicycle. And when the wheels of this plastic garbage can gave out, somebody gave him a proper axle for the garbage can. So after hundreds of miles of road travel, he hauled 50 to 70 pounds of gear in this can behind him.
And it was just like, it's a roller. For those listening, it's like the rolling garbage can you put out at your curb.
Yes.
So he was just operating on those wheels until they broke.
Yes.
And then
somebody took pity on him and gave him an axle for his wheeled garbage can.
Because everyone who lives there is like, you're going to die.
Yes. That comes up a lot.
Like, of course. Like, they're like, you're going to die. Like,
Yes.
you're nowhere.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. I'm laughing because of Schadenfreude. Not because I think it's actually funny. It's just, I can't believe this guy was like, he's like insane.
I love his ingenuity.
He's like the Alex Honnold of running around Alaska.
He self-identified as the crazy Frenchman.
Okay, so he's aware of his.
He is.
Okay,
yes.
that's perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So we're getting a timeline now, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so the timeline starts a couple of years before François disappears, because in order to understand him, you need to understand why he was in Alaska in the first place.
Okay.
So, January 6th, 2011, François arrives in Montreal from France. At this point, Guenot was working as a ski instructor and mountain guide. In his 20s, he moved around a lot. He eschewed commercialism and capitalism. He wanted to live simply, with few possessions. He wanted to see the world. Back in 2010, when he was playing a game of Risk with his friends, everybody was assigned a spot on the globe. He was given the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. He decided he was going to try to get there. So he and his friends vowed to meet there and play Risk again in a few years. So they each kept their Risk game piece. So Guenot first dips into the U.S. He visits the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone. He's working odd jobs, a dishwasher here and there along the way. He makes it to Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada, a few months later, and he's keeping a blog as he goes along. November of 2011. Guenot turns up in Pelly Crossing. That's halfway to Whitehorse in the Yukon in Canada. He made his way from Alberta to the Yukon by canoe, by bike, on foot, mostly relying on the kindness of strangers and his own ingenuity. He cobbled together a bicycle from 4 or 5 scrap bicycles he found in the dump, and he rode it 500 miles. So he stays there for 6 months. He's teaching French cooking at the community center. He's charming the local residents. He's got a real zest for learning their traditions. He really appreciates their way of living. So one Athabascan elder teaches him how to snare rabbits and how to cook traditional dishes. She sews him mittens and mucklucks because his gear is not suited to the Alaskan winter weather. January of 2012.
He's like the Chris McCandless of France.
Exactly.
Like, every country's got their one guy.
Yes.
This is his.
Guenot arrives in Whitehorse, continuing toward Alaska, eking out a living as he goes. So he'll do things like help an elderly woman as a handyman in exchange for a few days' food and lodging. He often pops up in a new town, bedraggled, cold, and hungry. Then he spends 10 days lost in the wilderness. He survives falling through rotten ice and nearly freezing to death. At this point, some of the locals start complaining that he should have known better than to walk on rotten ice. But they feed him, they shelter him, they share moose meat stew and stories.
I'm going to look up what rotten ice is. I've never heard of the term rotten ice.
It's ice with impurities in it that's thin and melting. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm watching Joe look up rotten ice.
Yeah, I've seen rotten ice, and I just didn't know that's what they called it.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, we get that in Wisconsin and Illinois all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he should have known better.
Yeah. But he still managed to survive 10 days in the wilderness after falling through, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm just going, for those not watching, I'm like just slowly scrolling through his blog, which is still live. I'll throw it in the show notes because it's pretty cool. He's got great pictures. Like, what an adventurer. He's like, sleeping situation a couple times is like, holy cow. I can't believe you're really not supposed to go in those because those can collapse. But
you're also not supposed to walk on rotten ice.
yeah, he was doing a lot of stuff that you're not supposed to do. Awesome.
So he continues trekking toward Dawson City, and he tells people he's making his way to Russia to meet his friends. Finally, he gets to Alaska. He's going cheap, resourceful. At this point, he reconstructs a kayak from 2 broken kayaks he finds in a dump in Anchorage. In this refurbished kayak, he travels to Seldovia, which is a small town off the road system on Kachemak Bay on the Kenai Peninsula. He arrives there in the fall of 2012.
Good timing. Here's a picture. I just scrolled to Seldovia
perfect.
Harbor.
It's like we planned that.
I know, right?
So most people who've met François, they say he's thoughtful, clever, but naive to the dangers of the Alaskan wilderness. A few start expressing frustration with his disregard for his own safety. One resident, who was like a father to Guenot, refuses to give him a dry suit to wear to kayak to Russia across the ocean because he says he doesn't want to be part of François' doomed plan. So by the fall of 2013, François is living in a tent in Kokonik Village across the Cook Inlet from Seldovia on property belonging to friend Gary Nielsen. Crossing the Cook Inlet by kayak is no easy feat. It took François 17 hours of kayaking in this refurbished kayak held together with tree sap to get there. When he arrives, the residents of Seldovia, which there are 200 residents, they start to refer to François as the town's one-man homeless problem. So they talk him out of continuing on to Russia that winter. He agrees to spend the winter there. In exchange for the hospitality, he helps care for teams of sled dogs. When the temperatures drop too low for him to sleep in the tent, he sleeps in the steam bath. Okay, now it's spring. May 9th of 2014. Guenot sets off. His destination is Perryville, 300 miles away. And from there, he will go on to Russia. His friends warn him about the terrain and the weather on this route, but Guenot is undeterred. He charters a plane to have his kayak and gear cached along the route at Amokdadori Creek. May 26th, 2014. The last known interaction with François occurs there, on the north coast of Katmai National Park. 2 Alaska state biologists flying over spot Guenot fishing, and they land to investigate. Apparently not understanding that what he was doing was illegal, Guenot complained to them that he'd only caught 1 fish, a starry flounder. But then he quickly caught on and pretended he couldn't find his passport, because at that point he knew it was expired. So the officers depart. They're trying to stay ahead of bad weather. They seem amused by Guenot. They do confiscate his gill net, though. Then June 20th, 2014, Katmai National Park rangers discover a kayak, food, journals, maps, and a passport on Cape Douglas in the Shelikof Strait. It separates the Kodiak Archipelago from the rest of Alaska. This is about 20 miles south of Amokdadori, where the U.S. Fish and Game officers met Guenot. The Alutiiq name for the strait translates to real ocean, thought to be named for the ferocity of the weather there. The coastline is rocky and ragged, and the fact that the kayak isn't completely shattered raises the idea that Guenot might have landed on the beach and continued on foot. But there's no route on foot to his destination, and why would he leave full bags of food? These goods are found in a waterproof bag, also on the beach, a couple of miles south of where his kayak is found. Also found, solar panels and GPS units. The last entry in Guenot's journal was dated June 15th. According to his family, it said Guenot was in Cape Douglas and getting ready to depart in his kayak. He said the weather was windy but clear and the ocean was quiet. At the time of François' disappearance, his father had a plane ticket to fly to Alaska to spend a month with his son, whom he had not seen in 4 years. François' final journal entry expressed frustration at how slow his journey was going. He'd hoped to cover 12 miles each day, but because of wind and currents, he was only averaging half that. So he was getting worried he was going to be late to meet his father. The last entry says, "Shit, I am a fool. Completely crazy. I'll go on. We shall see." June 22nd, 2014.
I feel like that's when the disaster starts happening, when you start losing faith in yourself.
And you start rushing.
Yeah, or it's just like you start doubting.
Yes.
And that's kind of when you start making mistakes and things like that. I think we hear that a lot when people get lost. It's you let your mind go, then everything else goes.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2 days later, June 22nd, 2014, the aerial and marine search for François is suspended. Without knowing his exact overland route, it was too hard to narrow the search area. So early July 2014, Philippe and Robert Guenot, François' brother and father, they arrive in Homer, Alaska. The men highlight the list of gear that was not recovered: a compass, the camera, knives, tarps, safety vest, fishing gear. His family and his friends tell authorities that if François made it to shore, he could very well be surviving in Katmai National Park. A local pilot volunteers his time and performs a few aerial searches, but nothing is found. Alaska State Troopers don't want to restart the ground search because it's such a remote area and there are so few resources and there's no clear route or direction. July 19th, 2014. The date François had made plans to meet up with friends and family back in Alaska. One of those friends, Gary Nielsen, said, "If he doesn't show up by July 19th, he's probably dead."
So he was going along this coastline. He wasn't
Yes.
trying to get to Kodiak Island, right?
He was not.
Okay, so he was just taking the water to get through.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that I'm
Yes.
sure is just a wild place to
Yes.
try and be on a kayak.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really far. What was the name of the city he was going to again?
So see Perryville right there? That's where he started
Okay.
then. And then he was aiming for Russia eventually.
Yeah, he had quite a way to go.
Uh-huh.
Either on this side or on the Bering Sea, where you have fishing boats that sometimes don't
Right.
make it, let alone a
Right.
kayak held together with tree sap.
Yes, with strings for pedals.
Jeez. Okay. That is wild.
So his brother and his father spend a month in Alaska, and then they return to France. At this point, Alaska state officials consider François lost to the water. They do not resume the search. Then a month later, on September 8th, 2014, during a beach cleanup on Shuyak Island, which is separated from the Shelikof Strait by Cape Douglas, where Guenot's belongings were found washed up, a 36-year-old Kodiak resident, Andy Schroeder, he's the director of the Kodiak Island Trails Network, he finds human remains still wearing chest waders. Alaska State Troopers recover the remains, and they're sent to the State Medical Examiner's office in Anchorage for identification. By November 5th, Alaska State Troopers confirm the remains belong to François using dental records.
Oh, wow. That's really far north of where he was.
Yes.
So the currents, because he started from
Yes.
Perryville,
Yes.
and he was trying to go southwest,
Yes.
and that took him all the way north. Let's just get as the crow flies, just from Perryville. That's 310 miles.
Yeah.
And it's more than that, because
Yeah.
this is a straight line. That's how crazy those currents are.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. He didn't stand a chance in a kayak.
No.
Even if it was a good kayak.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that must have been terrifying. Holy cow. Okay. That is insane. So what are they're able to confirming from his dental records.
Mm-hmm.
What are the official theories? I mean, I can guess.
Yes.
But if you want to go through the official
Yes.
ones, then we can talk about what we think.
It seems most probable that he ran into trouble on the water and drowned or suffered hypothermia. Humans lose body temperature 25 times faster in the water and 200 times faster in moving water. So he really didn't stand a chance without a dry suit
I
in
didn't
a
know
bad
that.
kayak.
200 times faster moving water.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that water's just frigid.
Exactly.
Oh, my gosh. So, friends and family, what do they think?
So François obviously had a history of taking off on adventures before and doing things no local would attempt, like crossing the ice during breakup. And there was that time he was lost for 10 days and survived. So his family and friends had pointed out that since several elements of his gear that could have helped him survive were not found, they were really holding out hope that he was still alive somewhere right up until the day his body was found.
So, what do you think? Do you
I
tend
think
to
it's
agree?
probably a bad idea to try to kayak to Russia.
Yeah, I mean, even if like everything's fine, you probably shouldn't try and kayak into Russia.
You really shouldn't.
Like even if it's just a lake and there's no weather. I thought there was and I could just be making this up, and maybe it used to be this way. See, why wouldn't he go here? I thought at some point in the winter, and for those watching, there's a point where there's an island right in between the United States and Russia. And I mean, this distance from like Russia to the U.S., it's 50 miles. Like, why wouldn't he try and make his way up there and cross? Because where he was trying to cross would have been hundreds of miles. Like, it's almost suicide at that point. Because if he's going along, yeah, look at this.
Yeah,
I mean, was he going to try and take these islands
probably.
all
and
the
use
way
them.
across?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe that makes sense. Those are,
shelter, somewhere to break.
yeah, but you're in between the Bering
Yeah.
Sea and the Pacific. Whereas this, and this is me not knowing literally anything, like Nome, Alaska is pretty big. If you can make your way to Nome and then go along this coastline and go to Russia, or maybe that's what the Russians would expect you to do. He's trying to sneak up on Russians. Maybe, I don't know. That is wild. So was his whole goal to go through here, go through Russia, and like head home?
Yeah, he wanted to meet his friends in Russia and play Risk again with his game piece. His game piece of the Kamchatka Peninsula
Yeah.
was found among his belongings in the cabin he'd been staying in back in Seldovia.
That's very poetic.
Yes.
Yeah, this seems a lot harder of a route to get to Russia than to just go up by Nome. That is wild. So I'm going to agree with all the theories of he took a very small battered kayak into a very unforgiving ocean space with high currents and just never stood a chance. I mean, that's the most plausible. Do you have an off the deep end? I mean, we can go crazy because this one's pretty clear cut.
I think any form of foul play is basically off the deep end in this case.
Well, we're not close enough to Russia for it to be the Russians unless they knew of his plan and thwarted him. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of sounded like everyone was nice to them and just like, yep, you're crazy. All right, I'll help you, I guess.
Basically.
I mean, the guy who wouldn't give him his suit, I don't think that would have mattered.
Probably
if he
not,
fell out of the
no.
kayak
No.
and
But
he ended up 300. How many days was it before, like, when he set out to when his body was found? I mean, we might have to guess. Was it like a couple months?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so it wasn't like 2 days his body moved
No.
like 300 miles. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it must have been maybe capsized, the water's so cold, moving. Didn't have a life jacket or that's insane. So I think this one's one of the more clear-cut ones we have. It's really unfortunate because he seemed like such a cool individual. Like, you look at his blog posts. I will post it because you can go through there. He met a ton of
Yes.
people. He got people to help him out. Probably made a huge impact in all the lives that he came into, which is great. I mean, that's the type of person that I like. I would have loved to run into a guy like that. But
Me too. The woman who taught him how to sew mukluks, 6 months after she taught him how to sew, he mailed her a pair that he'd made himself like to honor what she taught him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she said, she was interviewed and she said she still has them, that they were beautiful, that he clearly like understood and really appreciated everything.
It's cool because if you're going to give anybody a pass on not following up with people, it'd be someone who's doing what he's doing. And he cared enough about her and the people he ran into that he still kept in touch and sent them things. So that's sounds like such an awesome dude. That's really unfortunate. But, I mean, a guy like that, I think you're inevitably going to meet that end. I think about that with Alex Honnold, too. He just climbs huge mountain faces with no safety measures. Like, it's only a matter of time, or he retires before it happens. So, yeah, I think this one's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Anything else to add? I thought this went really well. I'm like so excited for more Gone in Alaska shows.
Thank you.
For all of you tuning in, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you all for listening and sharing Locations Unknown with your friends and family. Be sure to like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, where we are remonetized. You can go back and resubscribe. We promise not to share any more park service videos. We thought we were doing a service, so apparently we can't do that. Also, if you'd like to support the show monetarily, visit our website or Facebook store to buy some sweet swag. Additionally, you can subscribe to our Patreon account. As I said, YouTube subscriptions, Apple subscriptions, anywhere where you can subscribe to our extra episodes, you'll get some cool swag, special events, and all the other stuff that we come up with you get to see first. And most recently was the Bear NATO stuff that's coming out, which you'll see a great thing from John Woods, a huge fan of ours. And lastly, when enjoying the beauty of nature, whether backpacking, camping, or simply taking a walk, always remember to leave no trace. Thanks, and we will see you all next time.